The massive space station turned slowly against the star field, its lights blinking like scattered diamonds in the darkness. Station Harmony was bigger than most cities on Earth, home to over 50,000 beings from across the galaxy. Ships came and went every hour, carrying diplomats, traders, and travelers from hundreds of different worlds. Commander Jake Sullivan stood at the observation deck, watching a Xanthari cargo vessel dock at Bay 7. The ship looked like a giant metal whale, its hull covered in the flowing script that marked all Xanthari ships. Jake had been stationed here for 8 months now, long enough to recognize most of the regular visitors by their ship designs alone. The station hummed with activity around him. Alien voices mixed with human speech in the corridors. The air recyclers worked overtime to handle the different atmospheric needs of so many species. Some areas of the station were kept warmer for the reptilian races while others stayed cool. For beings who preferred lower temperatures, Jake turned away from the window and walked toward the human section of the station. His boots clicked on the metal deck plating as he passed a group of tall, thin Valdic scholars discussing something in their musical language. They nodded politely as he passed. The Valdic had always been friendly to humans, curious about their rapid rise in galactic politics. The human quarters occupied 2 full levels of the station. It was not the largest section, but it was well organized. Jake had made sure of that. Every human on the station had a job to do, and they did it well. The other species had learned to respect human efficiency, even if they did not always understand it. Lisa Morgan looked up from her desk as Jake entered the communications center. She was young for her position, only 26, but she had a talent for languages that impressed even the Valdic. She could speak basic conversation in 12 alien tongues and was learning more every week. "Any word from the Korthek ship?" Jake asked, settling into the chair across from her workstation. Lisa's face grew serious. "They docked an hour ago. Ambassador Vex Korthek is aboard, along with his daughter and a full diplomatic staff. They requested immediate audience with the Federation Council." Jake nodded slowly. He had been expecting this visit, but that did not make it any easier. The Korthak Empire had opposed human membership in the Galactic Federation from the beginning. They saw humans as newcomers who had not earned their place among the established powers. "What's their official reason for being here?" Jake asked. "Trade negotiations with the Xanthari," Lisa replied, pulling up a file on her screen. "But intelligence suggests they're really here to challenge our treaty rights." The door to the communications center slid open with a soft hiss. Ben Carter walked in, his security uniform crisp and clean, despite having just finished a 12-hour shift. Ben was older than most of the crew, a former military man who had joined the diplomatic corps after retiring from active service. "Heard the Korthak ship came in," Ben said, pouring himself coffee from the machine in the corner. "Saw their security team in the main docking area. They're not trying to hide their strength." Jake stood and walked to the wall display showing the station layout. Red dots marked the current positions of all known Korthak personnel. They had spread out quickly after arriving, placing people in key areas throughout the station. It was a smart move, but also an aggressive one. "They're testing us," Jake said. "Ambassador Korthek wants to see how we react to pressure." The Korthek were an old race, one of the founding members of the Federation. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with thick scales and powerful claws. Their homeworld was a harsh place that had bred them for war. For thousands of years they had expanded their empire through conquest and intimidation. Humans were different. Earth had unified through diplomacy and trade, not conquest. When humanity reached the stars, they had chosen cooperation over domination. This approach had earned them friends among the peaceful species, but it also made them seem weak to races like the Korthek. "Sir," Lisa said, looking up from her console, "I'm getting reports from other sections. The Korthek delegation is asking questions about human security protocols. Our diplomatic procedures, even our daily routines. Ben set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. They're gathering intelligence. Standard pre-conflict behavior. Jake held up a hand. Let's not jump to conclusions. They have every right to ask questions. We're all supposed to be allies here. But even as he said it, Jake felt the tension building. The Korthak had made their feelings about humanity clear in previous meetings. They believed humans were too young, too violent, too unpredictable to be trusted with Federation membership. Every human success only seemed to make them more suspicious. The communication board chimed softly. Lisa touched the screen and listened to her earpiece for a moment. Her expression grew worried. "What is it?" Jake asked. "Ambassador Korthak has requested a formal meeting with you tomorrow morning. He wants to discuss what he calls concerns about human conduct in Federation space." Jake was not surprised. This confrontation had been building for months. The Korthak Empire controlled several important trade routes and had significant influence in the Federation Council. If they decided to make trouble for humanity, it could undo years of careful diplomatic work. "Set up the meeting," Jake said. "Conference room 3 with full recording for the record." Ben stepped forward. "Sir, I recommend increased security during the meeting. The Korthak brought more personnel than they need for simple trade talks." "Agreed," Jake said. "But keep it subtle. We don't want to appear hostile." As his team began making preparations, Jake returned to the observation window. The stars looked the same as always, cold and distant. But he knew that decisions made on this station could affect the future of human expansion into space. The Korthak were not the only species watching humanity's progress, with concern out there in the darkness. Entire civilizations were deciding whether humans could be trusted as partners or needed to be contained as a threat. Everything his people had worked for could depend on how well they handled the next few days. The station continued its slow rotation, carrying thousands of beings through space while they conducted the business of an interstellar community. Most of them had no idea that the balance of power in the galaxy might be about to shift. But Jake knew, and the weight of that knowledge settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Tomorrow would bring answers, one way or another. The main plaza buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of worlds gathered for the weekly cultural exchange. Colorful banners hung from the high ceiling, each one representing a different member species of the Federation. Music drifted through the air, a blend of sounds that would have been impossible on any single world. Lisa Morgan walked through the crowded marketplace, enjoying her first free time in days. She wore simple civilian clothes instead of her uniform, hoping to blend in with the other shoppers and visitors. The plaza was one of her favorite places on the station, where she could practice her language skills and learn about different cultures. Tony Richards and Amy Phillips walked beside her, both off-duty security personnel who had become her close friends during their time on the station. Tony was examining a Xanthari crystal sculpture, while Amy looked at fabric samples from the textile worlds. "Look at this," Lisa said, stopping at a small booth run by an elderly human trader. The man had set up a display of Earth artifacts, simple items that seemed exotic to alien visitors. She picked up a wooden flute, smooth and warm in her hands. "My grandmother made this," the trader explained. "Carved it herself from oak wood. Still plays like the day she finished it." Lisa brought the flute to her lips and played a soft melody, something her own grandmother had taught her years ago. The notes were clear and sweet, cutting through the background noise of the plaza. Several aliens stopped to listen, their heads turning toward the unfamiliar sound. "Beautiful," said a voice behind her. Lisa turned to see a young Korthak female watching her with obvious interest. The alien was smaller than most of her species, probably not much older than Lisa herself. Her scales were a lighter green then, the darker colors Lisa had seen on the male Korthak, and her eyes held curiosity instead of the cold calculation she was used to from their diplomats. Thank you, Lisa said, lowering the flute. It's a traditional earth instrument, very old design. The young Korthik stepped closer, her movements careful and non-threatening. I am Zara Korthik. My father is the ambassador, but I am here to learn about other cultures. This music, it is made by blowing air through the holes? Lisa nodded, pleased by the genuine interest. Exactly. You cover different holes with your fingers to change the pitch. Would you like to try? Zara's eyes widened with excitement, but before she could answer, a shadow fell across the booth. Lisa looked up to see Ambassador Vex Korthik towering over them, his massive form blocking out the plaza lights. His face showed pure rage, the kind of anger that made smart people step back and find somewhere else to be. Zara, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Step away from that creature immediately. The young Korthik female froze, her excitement turning to fear in an instant. Father, I was only learning about their music. She was showing me how the instrument works. You will not disgrace our family by associating with these primitives, Ambassador Korthik snarled. His voice carried across the plaza, causing conversations to stop and heads to turn. They are barely civilized animals, not worthy of your attention. Lisa felt the familiar sting of prejudice, but she kept her voice calm and respectful. Ambassador, your daughter was simply curious about human culture. There was no disrespect intended. She took a step back, giving the angry Korthik more space. Around them, the plaza had grown quiet as other visitors sensed the tension building. Tony and Amy moved closer to Lisa, their hands dropping casually. To their sides, where their sidearms rested, Ambassador Korthik's rage seemed to grow with every word Lisa spoke. How dare you address me directly, human? Your species has no right to speak to your betters without permission. Father, please, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. She meant no harm, but the ambassador was beyond reason now. His daughter's interest in human culture was a personal insult, a challenge to everything he believed about Korthik's superiority. In his mind, Lisa had corrupted his child, exposed her to inferior ideas that would weaken her character. Lisa continued, backing away, hoping to diffuse the situation through distance. I apologize if I have offended you, Ambassador. That was never my intention. Your very existence offends me, Korthik roared. Your species should never have been allowed into the Federation. You are violent, unpredictable, dangerous to civilized beings everywhere. The irony of his words was lost on him as his own anger spiraled out of control. Other aliens in the plaza watched in shock as one of the Federation's senior diplomats ranted like a street thug. Several Zenthari traders whispered among themselves, clearly disturbed by what they were witnessing. Amy Phillips stepped forward slightly, her training telling her that the situation was about to turn violent. Sir, perhaps we should contact station security to help resolve this misunderstanding. Ambassador Korthik spun toward her, his claws extending slightly from his massive hands. There is no misunderstanding, human. Your kind needs to learn their place in the natural order. Lisa saw the warning signs and tried one more time to calm the situation. Ambassador, I understand your concerns. I'll leave the area immediately if that would help. But her reasonable words only seemed to enrage him further. In his twisted logic, her calm response was proof of human deception, their ability to hide, their true violent nature behind false diplomacy. He had convinced himself that humans were a threat to galactic stability, and his daughter's curiosity about their culture was evidence of their corrupting influence. The explosion came without further warning. Ambassador Korthik's massive hand swept across the space between them, his claws catching Lisa across the left side of her face. The blow lifted her off her feet and sent her crashing into the booth behind her, scattering earth artifacts across the plaza floor. The wooden flute rolled away across the deck plating, its simple melody replaced by the sound of Lisa hitting the ground hard. Blood ran down her cheek from where his claws had torn the skin. She lay stunned among the scattered artifacts, trying to process what had just happened. The plaza fell completely silent. Even the background music seemed to stop as hundreds of beings stared in shock at what they had just witnessed. A Federation ambassador had committed unprovoked assault on a peaceful citizen in full view of dozens of witnesses. Zara Korthak stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth in horror. Tony and Amy were already moving, their security training taking over as they assessed the threat and moved to protect their friend. But across the plaza, someone else had been watching the entire confrontation unfold. Ben Carter had seen everything from the moment Ambassador Korthak first approached the booth. He had been too far away to intervene with words, but now words were no longer an option. The security chief was already moving before Lisa hit the ground. Ben Carter moved like lightning across the plaza floor. His years of military training took over completely, muscle memory guiding every step. The distance between him and Ambassador Korthak disappeared in seconds, but to the watching crowd it seemed like time had slowed down. The Korthak ambassador was still standing over Lisa, looking down at what he had done with a mixture of satisfaction and shock. He had lost control of his temper, something that rarely happened to a being of his diplomatic status. But he felt no regret, only a sense that he had put an inferior species in its proper place. He never saw Ben coming. The impact was devastating. Ben hit the much larger alien with the full force of his momentum, driving his shoulder into Korthak's midsection, just below the rib cage. The ambassador's breath exploded from his lungs as he doubled over, his massive frame suddenly helpless. Against the precisely applied force, Ben followed through with practiced efficiency. His left hand grabbed Korthak's right arm, while his right hand seized the back of the alien's neck. A quick pivot and the ambassador was airborne, his 8-foot frame spinning through empty space before crashing to the deck with a sound like thunder. The plaza shook from the impact. Ambassador Korthak lay flat on his back, stunned and gasping for air. His diplomatic robes were torn and dirty. For the first time in his adult life, he was looking up at someone else instead of down. Ben moved smoothly into a control position, dropping one knee onto the ambassador's back while maintaining his grip on the alien's arm. Standard restraint procedure, designed to immobilize without causing permanent injury. The same technique he had used on human criminals was just as effective on alien diplomats. "You are under arrest for assault," Ben said clearly, his voice carrying across the silent plaza. "You struck an unarmed Federation citizen without provocation. You have the right to remain silent." Ambassador Korthak tried to struggle, but Ben's position gave him perfect leverage. Every time the alien attempted to move, pressure on his arm warned him that resistance would only bring pain. The human was smaller and weaker, but he knew exactly what he was doing. "Release me immediately," Korthak gasped, his voice muffled by the deck plating. "I have diplomatic immunity. You cannot treat me this way." "Diplomatic immunity does not cover criminal assault," Ben replied calmly. "Federation law is very clear on this point." Around them, the crowd began to stir from their shock. Other Korthak personnel pushed through the gathering aliens, their hands moving toward their weapons. But they stopped when they saw Tony Richards and Amy Phillips flanking Ben, their own sidearms drawn but not yet aimed. "Everyone stay calm," Amy called out. "This situation is under control." Tony kept his eyes on the Korthak security team while speaking into his communicator. "Command, we have a situation in the main plaza. Request immediate backup and medical assistance." The other aliens in the plaza watched in amazement. They had heard stories about human efficiency and military precision, but seeing it in action was something entirely different. Ben had taken down one of the most physically powerful beings in known space in less than 5 seconds. Zara Korthak knelt beside Lisa, helping the injured human sit up slowly. Blood still ran from the claw marks on Lisa's face, but she was conscious and alert. The young Korthak's hands shook as she pressed a clean cloth against the wounds. "I am so sorry," Zara whispered. "This is not who we are supposed to be. This is not what the Federation stands for." Lisa managed a weak smile despite her pain. "It's not your fault. You were just interested in learning something new." The irony was not lost on the watching crowd. The human who had been attacked was comforting the alien whose father had hurt her. Meanwhile, the Korthek, ambassador who claimed humans were violent and uncivilized, lay pinned to the ground by his own actions. Commander Jake Sullivan arrived with a full security team, moving quickly through the crowd that parted to let them pass. He took in the scene with a single glance. His communications officer injured but stable, his security chief maintaining professional control of the situation, and a Federation ambassador face down on the deck. "Report," Jake said to Ben. "Ambassador." Korthek struck Officer Morgan without warning or provocation. Ben replied without moving from his position. "Multiple witnesses." I responded with minimum necessary force to prevent further assault and secure the suspect. Jake nodded and activated his communicator. "Station medical to the main plaza, priority 1. Station command to the main plaza for diplomatic incident response." Within minutes, the plaza filled with medical personnel and neutral station security. Lisa was helped to her feet by a medic who began treating her injuries immediately. The cuts were not deep, but they would need proper cleaning and sealing to prevent infection. Ambassador Korthek was lifted to his feet by station security, his hands secured behind his back with restraint fields. His diplomatic robes hung in tatters, and his scales showed scrapes from his impact with the deck. The physical damage was minor, but his dignity had been completely destroyed. "This is an outrage," he snarled as they led him away. "I demand to speak with the Federation Council immediately. These humans attacked me without cause." Several aliens in the crowd began speaking at once, their voices rising in protest. They had seen everything, and their testimony would leave no doubt about who had committed the first act of violence. "Without cause?" called out a Zenthari trader. "You struck that human female first. We all saw it." "The human was backing away," added a Valdic scholar. "She offered no threat or insult. Your attack was unprovoked." A dozen other voices joined in, aliens from multiple species all confirming the same facts. Ambassador Korthek had lost his temper and committed assault in full view of witnesses. His claims of human aggression rang hollow when he was the one who had chosen violence over words. As they took him away, Korthek's eyes met those of his daughter. Zara looked at him with a mixture of shame and disappointment that cut deeper than any physical blow. In trying to prove human inferiority, he had only demonstrated his own failure as both a diplomat and a father. The plaza slowly began to return to normal, but the effects of what had happened would spread far beyond Station Harmony. News of the incident would reach every corner of Federation space within hours, carried by the very aliens who had witnessed it firsthand. Carter helped Lisa to her feet as the medics finished their initial treatment. She was stable and would recover fully, but the attack had changed something fundamental about human standing in the galaxy. The Korthek had always claimed that humans were too violent for civilized society. Now everyone had seen which species had chosen violence when faced with a simple cultural exchange. 3 weeks after the Plaza incident, Station Harmony hosted the largest gathering of Federation species in its history. Representatives from over 100 worlds had come to witness what many were calling a turning point in galactic relations. The main conference hall buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages as beings who had never met face to face shared their thoughts about recent events. Lisa Morgan stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of alien faces. The healing marks on her cheek had faded to thin white lines that would disappear completely in time. She wore her dress uniform, the same one she had been wearing when she first met Zara Korthek in the plaza 3 weeks ago. "When I picked up that wooden flute," Lisa began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems, "I never expected it would change so many lives. I was just sharing a piece of human culture with someone who seemed interested in learning. The audience listened in complete silence. Her story had already spread across the galaxy, but hearing it directly from her gave it new weight. This was not a political speech or diplomatic statement. This was one person talking about a moment that had reshaped interstellar relations. The flute belonged to my grandmother, Lisa continued. She carved it from oak wood grown on Earth, using tools that her own grandmother had taught her to use. When I played it that day, I was sharing thousands of years of human tradition with someone from another world. She paused and looked toward a section of the audience where Zara Korthak sat with the Federation asylum officers. The young Korthak had been granted full refugee status and was now working as a cultural liaison, helping to bridge understanding between species with different social structures. That sharing of culture, that curiosity about how others live and think, is what the Federation is supposed to represent, Lisa said. It should not matter what world we come from or what we look like. What matters is our willingness to learn from each other. The applause started slowly, with a few Zenthari clicking their mandibles in approval. Then the Valdic scholars began their musical humming that indicated strong agreement. Within moments, the entire hall erupted in sounds of approval from dozens of different species. Commander Jake Sullivan watched from the side of the stage, proud of how his communications officer had grown into her role as an unofficial spokesperson for human values. The past 3 weeks had transformed her from a talented linguist into a galactic symbol of peaceful cooperation. Ben Carter stood nearby, wearing the new rank insignia he had received from Federation Security Command. His response to the Korthak assault had become a textbook example of appropriate force escalation, studied at security academies across the galaxy. But Ben took no pleasure in his fame. He had simply done his job the way his training had taught him. The human approach to conflict resolution interests us greatly, said Counselor Vex, a crystalline being whose species communicated through light patterns. You have strength, but you choose restraint. You can fight, but you prefer peace. This combination is rare in our experience. Jake stepped forward to address the assembly. Counselor Vex, humans learned long ago that true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction is necessary and when it is not. He gestured toward the mixed crowd of aliens and humans in the audience. Every species here has faced the choice between violence and cooperation. Some have chosen conquest, others have chosen isolation. Humans chose a third path. We chose to seek out others who shared our values and work with them to build something better. The discussion that followed lasted for hours. Species after species stood to share their own experiences with conflict and cooperation. The aggressive Korthak approach was compared unfavorably to human restraint by beings who had suffered under similar domination in the past. Ambassador Korth, the new Korthak representative, listened to the criticism with visible discomfort. He was younger than his predecessor and represented a growing faction within the Korthak Empire that questioned their traditional supremacist policies. The complete failure of Ambassador Vex Korthak had strengthened their position considerably. The Korthak Empire acknowledges the mistakes of our former representative, Korth said when called upon to speak. We are reviewing our diplomatic policies to ensure such incidents never happen again. We hope to rebuild trust with our Federation partners, including humanity. It was not a full apology, but it was more than anyone had expected from the proud Korthak. Jake nodded politely, knowing that real change would take time. The important thing was that the conversation had started. When the formal session ended, Jake found himself surrounded by representatives from various worlds. Many wanted to discuss increased cooperation with human colonies. Others were interested in learning more about human conflict resolution techniques. A few even asked about establishing exchange programs between their worlds and Earth. Commander Sullivan, called out Ambassador Vex, The Aquari delegate, whose water-filled suit allowed her to participate in air-breathing environments. My people have been impressed by human adaptability. We would like to propose a joint research station in the Outer Rim territories. Similar offers came from a dozen other species. The Zenthari wanted expanded trade agreements. The Valdic scholars proposed academic exchanges. Even some of the more isolated species expressed interest in closer relations with humanity. Lisa found Zara Korthek near the cultural displays that had been set up around the conference hall. The young alien was examining a collection of musical instruments from various worlds, including several earth pieces similar to the flute that had started everything. "Do you ever regret asking for asylum?" Lisa asked quietly. Zara considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my father's prejudices blinded him to the beauty of what you were sharing. But I do not regret my choice to stay with the Federation." She picked up a simple wooden recorder, similar to the flute, but with a different tone. "My new job involves helping species understand each other's cultures. Every day I learn something new about the diversity of life in the galaxy. This is the future I want to be part of." Later that evening, Jake stood once again at the observation deck, watching ships arrive and depart from the station. But now he saw them differently. Each ship represented not just trade or diplomacy, but the growing web of relationships that held the Federation together. The incident with Ambassador Korthek had been a crisis, but it had also been an opportunity. Humanity had proven itself not through conquest or intimidation, but through character and principle. They had shown that strength and restraint could exist together, that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the wisdom to handle conflict. Correctly. Ben Carter joined him at the window, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Any word on the final charges against the former ambassador?" "Guilty on all counts," Jake replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "He'll be banned from Federation space permanently. The Korthak Empire has also stripped him of his diplomatic status." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars turn slowly past the window. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but it was also full of beings who just wanted to live in peace and security. Humanity had earned its place among them not by proving they were superior, but by proving they were worthy partners. "Sir," Ben said finally, "what do you think happens next?" Jake smiled, thinking of all the cooperation requests they had received that day. "I think we keep doing what we've been doing, Ben. We keep showing the galaxy that humans can be trusted. We keep proving that there's a better way than fear and domination." In the distance, a new ship approached the station, its hull marked with symbols Jake did not recognize. Another first contact, another chance to build bridges between worlds. The future was full of possibilities, and humanity would meet them with the same principles that had carried them this far. Strength when necessary, restraint when possible, and always the hope that understanding could triumph over fear. News of the incident spread through Federation space faster than anyone expected. Within 6 hours, every major world had received reports about what happened on Station Harmony. The story was simple enough that even basic translation programs could handle it accurately, and the facts were clear from multiple witness accounts. Commander Jake Sullivan sat in his office, fielding communication requests from across the galaxy. His desk display showed incoming messages from Federation Council members, news services, and diplomatic missions on dozens of worlds. Everyone wanted to know the human response to what they were calling the Plaza incident. "Sir," Lisa Morgan said from the doorway. Her face still showed the healing marks from Korthek's claws, but she had insisted on returning to duty despite medical recommendations for rest. "The Korthek Empire has issued an official protest. They're demanding Ben's immediate arrest and our expulsion from Federation space." Jake looked up from his reports. "What are they claiming now?" "Unprovoked attack on their ambassador. Cultural misunderstanding that escalated due to human aggression." They say Ben used excessive force against a peaceful diplomat. Lisa's voice remained steady, but Jake could see the anger in her eyes. Peaceful diplomat, Jake repeated slowly. Is that what they're calling assault now? The communication board chimed with another incoming message. This one carried the priority codes of the Federation Council itself. Jake opened the channel and found himself looking at Counselor Thren, a tall blue-skinned being from one of the founding worlds. Commander Sullivan, Thren said, his voice formal but not unfriendly. The Council has reviewed the preliminary reports from Station Harmony. We need your official statement regarding the incident with Ambassador Korthek. Jake straightened in his chair. Counselor, my people acted in accordance with Federation law and station security protocols. Ambassador Korthek committed unprovoked assault on one of my officers. Security Chief Carter responded with appropriate force to prevent further violence. The Korthek delegation claims their ambassador was provoked by human interference with their cultural practices, Thren replied. They say your officer deliberately corrupted the ambassador's daughter with human influences. Counselor, Officer Morgan was engaged in normal cultural exchange activities. She demonstrated a musical instrument to a curious visitor. There was no provocation or interference. Jake kept his voice calm and professional. We have security, recordings, and multiple witnesses from various species. Thren nodded slowly. We have reviewed those recordings, Commander. The evidence clearly shows that Ambassador Korthek initiated physical violence. However, the political situation is complex. The Korthek Empire wields significant influence in the Council. Before Jake could respond, another voice joined the conversation. If I may, Counselor Thren. The speaker was Ambassador Vorth, the senior Zenthari representative to the Federation Council. His insect-like features showed the rigid posture that indicated strong emotion among his people. The Zenthari delegation wishes to state our support for the human response to this incident, Vorth continued. We observed the attack firsthand through our trade representatives on Station Harmony. The human female showed remarkable restraint when faced with verbal abuse. The assault was completely unprovoked. Jake felt a surge of gratitude but kept his expression neutral. The Zenthari carried weight in Federation politics, and their support could make a significant difference. Furthermore, Vorth added, we were impressed by the professionalism shown by human security forces. The takedown was executed with precision and minimum necessary force. This demonstrates exactly the kind of restraint we hope to see from all Federation members. Counselor Thren made notes on his personal display. Thank you, Ambassador Vorth. Are there other delegations who wish to make statements? The communication expanded to include several more channels. One by one, representatives from different worlds added their voices to the discussion. The Valdic scholars praised human diplomatic restraint. The Aquari delegation noted that humans had chosen legal channels over revenge. Even some of the smaller species that rarely spoke in council sessions offered their support. The evidence is overwhelming, said Counselor Murex, an elderly being from one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Ambassador Korthek violated the most basic principles of diplomatic conduct. His claims of human aggression are contradicted by his own actions. Jake watched as the political tide turned in humanity's favor. The Korthak Empire's reputation for aggressive expansion worked against them now. Other species remembered times when Korthak diplomats had made similar threats and demands. This incident was just the latest example of their arrogant behavior. There's another matter to consider, Counselor Thren said. Zara Korthek, the ambassador's daughter, has formally requested asylum with the Federation. She claims she cannot represent an empire that endorses violence against peaceful beings. This news surprised Jake. He had not expected the young Korthek to take such a drastic step. Requesting asylum meant cutting all ties with her birth world and species. It was not a decision anyone made lightly. Her request includes intelligence about Korthek military capabilities and expansion plans, Thren continued. Information that could be valuable for Federation security. However, granting asylum will certainly increase tensions with the Korthak Empire. Ambassador Vorth spoke again. The Federation has always protected beings who seek refuge from oppression. If we abandon that principle now, we lose our moral authority. The discussion continued for another hour, with representatives from various worlds weighing in on the political and legal aspects of the situation. Jake found himself impressed by the level of support for human actions. Many species that had been neutral about human Federation membership now spoke positively about human character and restraint. When the communication finally ended, Jake leaned back in his chair and considered what had just happened. The Korthak attack had backfired completely. Instead of proving human unfitness for Federation membership, it had demonstrated exactly why humans deserved their place among the stars. Lisa had remained in the office throughout the long discussion, taking notes and monitoring other communications. "Sir," she said, "we're getting reports from our other diplomatic missions. Several species that have been cool toward humanity are now requesting increased cooperation agreements." Jake was not entirely surprised. The galaxy respected strength, but it respected principled strength even more. Humans had shown they could defend themselves without becoming the aggressors. They had used force only when necessary, and had stopped the moment the threat was neutralized. "What about Ambassador Korthak himself?" Jake asked. "He's being held by station security, pending formal charges. The Federation prosecutor is reviewing the case, but with so many witnesses and clear recordings, conviction seems certain." Lisa paused. "Sir, he's also been formally disavowed by his own government. That was the final insult. The Korthak Empire was abandoning their own ambassador to save face. They would claim he acted without authorization, that his behavior did not represent official policy. It was a lie, but it would allow them to avoid taking responsibility for his actions." Jake stood and walked to his window, looking out at the ships coming and going from the station. Each one carried beings from different worlds, all working together in the complex web of interstellar relations. The incident with Korthak had reminded everyone why that cooperation was necessary. "Lisa," he said, "prepare a statement for the Federation news services. Keep it simple. We're grateful for the support shown by our allies and partners. We remain committed to peaceful cooperation with all Federation members. Justice will be served through proper legal channels." As Lisa began drafting the statement, Jake reflected on how quickly things had changed. 3 days ago, humans were still trying to prove they belonged in the Federation. Now they had allies speaking up for them across the galaxy, and their principles were being held up as an example for others to follow.